Hello and welcome to the Irish Pagan School YouTube channel. This is co-founder of the Irish Pagan School, Lora O'Brien, and I'm here to provide you with a guide to create a sacred Morrigan altar. Now, I am an experienced practitioner and priest of the Irish Celtic goddess Morrigan, and I have been for a very long time. I'm coming up 30 years now, I think. Um, Dedicated or devoted to Irish paganism, particularly, and at least 20, if not 25, to the Mórrígan specifically. So that's a while now. And I have had a lot of experience with the Mórrigan's cave, her most sacred site here in Rathcroghan. And we do have a playlist on this channel about the Mórrigan, which will come up at the end if you want to explore a little bit further in some of my other Morrigan videos. But for now, what I would like to do is offer you a free guide because it will absolutely go side by side as you set up your devotional altar to the Morrigan, which I will show you step by step how to do in just 1 minute. But we have at morriganintensive.com/challenge, we have a free 5-day challenge, which looks at prayers and the lore and just getting to know the Morrigan a bit better and your relationship with this Irish goddess. And all of that is very important with regards to having things to do as you set up your sacred Morrigan altar and your sacred space set up in devotion to the Irish goddess Morrigan. So, whether you're new to goddess worship or you are a seasoned practitioner like myself, what I want to give you is the ability to set up a dedicated and meaningful devotional space. Now, whether you call it an altar or just a devotional space or just that shelf in my gaff, my house, that is entirely up to you. What we're going to look at is the significance of some of the colors, images, some of the items that are associated with the Morrigan. Once you have your devotional practice and your sacred space set up, and again, that 5-day challenge can help you with the whole devotional practice thing. And this video is going to help you with the setting up of the Morrigan altar. But what I want for you is to be able to honor the Morrigan and build relationship with the Morrigan in a very meaningful and personal way. So please hear me first off, even though I'm going to give you step-by-step instructions on how exactly to set it up and set it up authentically, not just some random bullshit on the internet. This is authentic Irish traditions practice, and it's very much rooted in the lore, but also in my own decades of experience with the Morrigan. But whether you do all of that or you don't, it has to be personal to you. It has to be meaningful to you. So that's why I'm going to explain my choices in each step. Okay. But ultimately, you have to make your own choices. And if there's something on your altar that would fit or you feel pulled to place on your altar for some particular reason, then the time that you spend in front of an altar hopefully developing a two-way communication with the Morrigan will maybe explain why that particular thing wants or needs to be on your altar, or why the Morrigan wants it there, or why you want it there. Much better than any random person on the internet, regardless of their experience or not, will be able to actually develop for you, right? So I'm trying to give you the tools to set up your own sacred devotional space, your own altar to the Morrigan, whatever you want to call it. But it's up to you to actually put it into practice, right? And ultimately, no priest, no person should be getting or would want to, I mean, if they're in any way ethical, would want to really get between you and your relationship with the gods. Okay. So all of that being said, let's dig into step one. So step one is about choosing the right space for your sacred altar. And that is important. And obviously, there's going to be very personal concerns such as privacy. Do you have privacy in your home? Do you own your own house and you live in it with your cats and nobody will be messing around with it. Although if you live with cats, they probably will be messing around with it. Let's be honest, we'll have the whole pushing the paw, pushing the items off the altar. But regardless of that, do you have the privacy to set up an elaborate dedicated space, a room even to the Morrigan? Or are you living in shared space, in space where it's not safe for you to be openly pagan, to, have your pagan spirituality or your devotional inclinations on show? If you're not comfortable, or for any reason you don't have the privacy to be very open about a space, you could literally have a corner of a window ledge. It can be anything, as simple as a small significant item on a shelf or a window ledge or on top of the mantelpiece or whatever you have available to you. It could be a picture, it could be just, an item and a tea light or a battery powered candle if that's all you can manage. Um, and that it can be as simple as that, or it can be quite elaborate. Okay. With regards to lighting, as I said, ideally we would have a living flame on it, but that might not suit where you are. You might not be able to. You might not be able to leave it unattended. So just have some kind of light on it that you can actively turn on, right? So whether it's lighting a candle or turning on a battery powered tea light, that is an important kind of a focus, even if it's just your own mental focus. But it does provide a focus for meditation, for any spell work or ritual work, for devotional reading of the lore, for prayer, for whatever. We're going to talk about all that in a minute. But all of those things need a focus. So if there is some kind of light there, ideally a candle, but do your best. Maybe some incense either. Create some atmosphere. If you can light a candle, if you can light a scented candle, if you can burn some incense, even if it's an incense cone or a stick. All of those things add to the atmosphere. They add to the sacredness of the space. But ultimately, you need to do what's right for you within your home space. Okay. So, step 2, gathering appropriate altar symbols. And what you put on your altar, again, is going to be very personal. What items you put on your altar. You could have a genuine, real crow skull or raven skull, if that's legal where you live. Ethically sourced, preferably. Don't go killing crows or ravens specifically to, get a skull for your altar. But sometimes you can buy them, or sometimes you can source them ethically where they have died of natural causes. Again, if that's legal in your area, wherever you live. You could also have a feather that you pick up, again, if that's legal where you live. I know that there are restrictions in some states in America, whether you can even pick up feathers off the ground from wild birds. Here in Ireland, that's fine. So I would always, if not often, have a fresh crow or raven feather on my altar. Crows and ravens are particularly associated with the Morrigan. The Morrigan is a shape-shifting goddess. In the Irish tradition, we have rooks here in Ireland. We have ravens, but they're rarer. And specifically, we have what's called the hooded crow, the Royston crow. It's the grey and black crow that is our native crow here in Ireland. And those are specifically associated with the Bive in our lore, in our text, in our mythology, in the glossaries, where a lot of Morrigan information is sourced from within our own mythological and historical traditions, our literary traditions from the medieval times, when these oral traditions, the earlier native oral traditions, were being written down by monks, priests, scholars, being recorded in our manuscripts. So we do have a manuscript tradition where a lot of this information is sourced from. I have studied it extensively and teach classes on it over at the Irish Pagan School. If you want to go and have a look at the Morrigan classes, I'll put a link below to those. There's a free and there's some paid ones as well. So you can learn a lot more about the lore, the manuscript traditions, and all the rest of it. But for now, you have options of altar symbols, which include anything associated with crows, ravens, rooks, corvids generally, I suppose, not the magpie. The magpie is not native to Ireland, but we have a couple of corvid species that are, and the hooded crow as well, then specifically would be for the bive. In the stories, she also transforms or shapeshifts into an eel, a wolf, a heifer, or a young cow. So any of those things would be appropriate as well. And then with regards to kind of other symbolic items or altar symbols, a spear would be a very appropriate one. A chariot, I mean, if you have the means, but clearly most people are not going to be able to source a chariot, but you could have a spear or something that represents a spear. So in the Táin Bó Ragavna, she does carry 2 spears, I believe. And that leads us on to step 3, which is images of the Mórrigan. Now, this is a very annoying topic in a lot of ways. For those of us, again, who know the literature, know the lore, the Mórrigan is the victim of many flights of fancy, many sexy, sexy depictions of, busty, winsome females whose arms or legs couldn't lift a sword or a spear or, ride a chariot or a horse or walk around in some cases without tripping over themselves. That's not really what the Mórrigan is. It's not what the Mórrigan is depicted as. There is one situation where she turns into a beautiful young woman dressed in multicolored clothing, but it is a shape that she shifts into specifically for the purpose that she is about at the time. And she also shapeshifts into a crone or a hag. So that would be just as appropriate as the sexy, sexy Morrigan images. But really, the only kind of physical description where she seems to be in a more natural human form, or a human form that she's not shifted into specifically for a purpose within the narrative, would be from a story called Táin Bó Ragavna, the cattle raid of Ragavna. And in that story, the physical description of the Morrigan is as a woman with red hair, red eyebrows, and wearing a red cloak. So if you have to have a human physical depiction of her, please make sure that she is at least warrior formed. Really try and shift away from those fantasy Morrigan male gaze images that are very, very common online. Go for something that looks strong, capable, warrior-like. In many of the stories, she does physically fight as well as magically fight in battles. She is a battle goddess. She's a goddess of prophecy, of change, of battle, and of magic. So again, if you have to have a physical human image on her, make sure that she is kind of meeting those criteria, that she would be able to physically have a battle or go into battle or survive in battle. And, red hair, red cloak, red eyebrows would be the most accurate physical description of her in human form that I have ever heard of or that I know of. So step 4, we're looking at maybe colors, stones, and herbs. And as I've said, the red is very important. Even the colors of red and white are particularly associated with the other world. Also black, or like a greeny black. So creatures that are designated as magical or otherworldly would often be that kind of reddy brown color. Herself would have that kind of, red hair, auburn hair, ginger even. So into browns and oranges. When you're talking about the reds, or just a deep red, a blood red is particularly associated with the bive, the red-mouthed bive. So all of those colours are appropriate. And as mentioned, then there's also the grey, the hooded crow, the scald crow. She is a grey wolf as well. She's also an eel. So black, grey, and red, and white to a certain extent would be colours that are particularly appropriate for the Mórrigan or a Mórrigan altar. Now, what about stones and herbs and crystals and all the rest of it? There isn't anything specifically that we can point to with regard to the Mórrigan lore that has a distinct association with the Mórrigan in the way of stones, herbs, crystals, anything like that. From my personal experience as a Mórrigan practitioner and priest, as I said, multiple decades worth, the native Irish plant mugwort, which is Artemisia vulgaris or Mongoc meshka in Irish, is appropriate for her. It does have associations of like dreams and visions, which would very much tie in with the prophecy elements and even the creativity and poetry elements. So again, it's really important to have a relationship with the Mórrigan, to read the lore, to pray, to, set up the altar space, which you're doing, which is great, and really kind of discover those associations for yourself. From Irish culture, Irish history, Irish tradition, the other kind of stones or crystals that we would have here, particularly associated with sacred sites, would be a white quartz. And we do have a natural amethyst deposit, that would be over in County Mayo. So those would be stones maybe that would be appropriate. And amethyst also has, so the white quartz would have otherworldly associations. It appears at a number of sacred archaeological sites around the island of Ireland. And amethyst then would also have maybe associations with dreams, visions, otherworldly, vaguely otherworldly associations. So you could definitely include either of those. And then the only other association, symbolic association along these lines that would be appropriate would be maybe some copper. So the metal copper or alloy copper. There were copper mines is copper an alloy? No, bronze is an alloy. Copper is a metal. Apologies. So there were copper mines very active, supplying a lot of Europe in Irish history down around the Pops of Anu in County Kerry. And there's the Raven Fortress down there as well, or the Raven City. And so the copper association has always been very relevant to me personally for my work with the Mórrigans. So take that as you will. But again, please find your own associations, particularly if these plants or stones are not native to you or not easily accessible to you. It is very important that we respect the earth that we live on. We are pagans and trying to practice pagan spirituality, whether you associate yourself with paganism or not. A respect for and reverence for the earth and our natural resources really should be second nature to everybody in this point in time. So please do be aware of those factors. Don't purchase crystals specifically. Please see if you can source them naturally. So step 5 then would be offerings or gifts. I mean, you have all these things where you have placed them around this sacred space or this devotional space that you're developing for the Irish goddess Mórrigan. So what do you actually do at this altar? What is the point of it? It's not just to set up something pretty and have it in your house, right? What you want to do is show up regularly at this sacred space, at this altar space, and make sure that you are giving regular offerings or gifts or Mórrigan devotionals to energize and to build relationship, okay? So for offerings, there isn't really traditional offerings. Well, I suppose there is within the fairy faith in Ireland. So that would be wine, mead, or whiskey, would be traditional alcoholic offerings. If you don't have access or don't want to work with alcohol, then even just plain water, spring water. Morrigan has specific water associations. So any kind of naturally sourced water would be ideal. But I mean, if you're just pouring tap water and that's all you've got, then go with that as well. Okay. Again, having that kind of living flame, even very occasionally, even if it's just for, 5 minutes while you sit down at the altar, if it's at all possible, helps to bring a natural energy to, especially if it's indoors, helps to bring a natural energy and a magic presence to that space, specifically if it's done with focused intent as an offering or as a devotional. You can also then if you have any kind of physical training that you're doing, that is a good offering that you can make to the Morrigan. You can dedicate your physical training, whether that's martial arts, running, exercise, going to the gym, anything like that. And if you happen to be doing that within the home environment, then setting up a Morrigan altar in the same space as you do physical exercises or physical devotional or physical training is particularly appropriate. Um, all that being said, you can also do mental or creative offerings as well. So it doesn't have to be physical. Not everybody is able bodied. And, physical activity or physical devotion or warrior training or, readying yourself for battle is not actually necessary because the Morrigan is a complex and multifaceted goddess. So again, there are some instances in the lore where she does participate physically in battles, but there are also many where she magically participates. There are also um, multiple examples of her intuitive prophecy or poetry. Our native poetic tradition is called Rusk, or OSC. We do have a whole class at the Irish Pagan School devoted to Rusk poetry within that native tradition. So if any of that appeals to you, absolutely use that as an offering or devotional as well in your Morrigan space. So if you have a creative studio, if you have a room where you compose poetry or do divination or anything like that, that is particularly appropriate to have beside the altar or have your altar beside that space. Or just, energetically link them in some way. So, step 6 and kind of the final step is again, besides the offerings, it's kind of how we use the altar. It's the consecration of it, the blessing of it, the charging for a new altar energy. And I would suggest that a particularly appropriate time, again, given my experience and practice over multiple decades, particularly appropriate times or seasons and cycles to dedicate an altar to charge or bless or consecrate an altar to the Morrigan would be during a dark moon. So just that night before the new moon, before you can see the new moon, when there's literally kind of no moon in the sky, that in between time, in my experience, is particularly sacred to my relationship with the Morrigan. So again, your mileage may vary. And then the other time of the year then would be Samhain or Halloween, so Samhain Eve, or really any time in the month of November. Samhain is November in Ireland, and the fire festivals are not really on a fixed schedule. We have some other videos on this channel which go into when the appropriate time for Lunasa, for example, would be, which is our harvest festival. There's a couple of different options for timing for the fire festivals. We actually have a cheat sheet, which you can find by going to Irish Pagan School irishpagan.school/Lunasa cheat sheet. I'll put a link to that below. But the fire festivals are interesting. Of course, we have classes as well at the Irish Pagan School. Kind of have classes on everything that you might be interested in with regard to Irish pagan spirituality, magic, the Morrigan, the gods, anything like that. So do go and check that out. There are free and paid classes. Again, links below. But then a particularly appropriate activity, kind of in line with offerings and gifts or devotionals, but its own thing as well, would be to, say, do a 5-day ritual where you show up every day for 5 days and read some of the Morrigan lore, meditate on it, focus on it, concentrate on it, maybe again let it inspire some creativity, say a prayer. And just so happens, once again, that all of those activities are catered for because they are particularly appropriate for Morrigan relationship, Morrigan devotional, and, getting to know this goddess. So they are catered for at morriganintensive.com/challenge. And again, link to that will be below. So this Morrigan altar, this devotional space, can be, and I hope will be for you, a source of spiritual strength, connection, and guidance. And again, prophecy and magic. You can do spells, you can do divination, you can do any of that in front of a Morrigan altar and dedicate that to the Morrigan, or look for communication back the way from the Morrigan. So I hope that that's been useful to you and you enjoy your authentic connection to Irish pagan spirituality with myself, Lora O'Brien, Morrigan priest and practitioner. So thank you very much. Slán go fóill, and I will see you in the next video.